Hey everybody, Dustin DePirac here, calling this Jeremy Price. Since today was the Will Sheehy show at the Indiana Purdue game and also in the press room afterwards, we're going to salute Will. 3 to the temple. That's what you do. Yeah, Indiana totally dominant. Will Sheehy, incredibly, is big time impressive in a situation where I don't know that he had to be. They were already up by 12 when Victor Oladipo went down with a bit of an ankle injury. But you got basically everything there is to see from Will Sheehy today. He was 9 for 9. That's a school record. Nobody's ever been better than 8 for 8. Lots of other guys have been perfect from the field, but no one's done it on 9 shots. Hit a pair of threes, scored off the dribble, scored on transition, hit a couple mid-range jumpers, just all kinds of Will Sheehy stuff. Also defended really well, had to take a bunch of assignments, especially when Oladipo was down, but just basically, again, just pretty much all things Will.
Yeah, pretty much this was the case of Will's often been referred to as kind of the sixth starter for this team, and very clearly showed that today. Stepped in the second half, played big minutes, and was also the beneficiary of a lot of nice setups from Yogi Ferrell and Jordan Hulls as well, but knocked down the couple of threes, and of course, as he remarked afterwards, those 3 free throws that he missed
those. That was the only thing where he wasn't perfect, is the 3 free runs. For some reason, he always misses his first one every game. I'm not sure why that is, but no, I mean, it just showed just how versatile he can be. I mean, he hasn't been necessarily consistent in terms of scoring. I mean, he's given, obviously great energy, great defense, decent rebounding for most of the year, but this was one of those cases where you saw just every part of that come together. Like you said, I mean, he was set up really well, but I mean, he did also benefit in a lot of cases from running the floor really well. I mean, they got out in transition a lot in this game. 18 fast break points, 25 points off turnovers, probably a few more transition points than you necessarily count up there. In a few cases, we'll just beat guys, and that was kind of a big thing that a lot of guys for Indiana were able to do. And, it was in part, and this is a separate story, but they outworked Purdue. Basically, and Matt Painter is very, very frustrated with his team based on the quotes that we saw in terms of their effort and how hard they're working. Indiana took advantage of that a lot. He was one of those guys. But even in the first half, when there were occasions where maybe they slowed down on offense, I mean, he was able to really cut into the rim. First off, cut to the basket and get some easy buckets that way of guys finding him. But also, I thought he scored off the dribble as well as I've seen.
Yeah, and in the second half, some of that was because both teams went to kind of a small lineup. So Sheehy had kind of a mismatch at almost the 4 spot and was able to go around a couple of the Purdue big guys, whether it was Lawson or Marchuse or whoever they happened to have in at the time. So he took advantage of those matchups. And the other thing you look at is he played 27 minutes today, which is more than he typically does. And Will Sheehy is the kind of player, the more minutes you give him, the more production you're going to get out of him.
Yeah. Oh, no, definitely. I mean, they're in a tough situation in terms of, like, all the players that they have, finding him time, because you do have, I mean, they're always going to find him time. It's a question, can you get him 25? Can you get him 30? Obviously with the guards that they have, with Hulls and Ferrell, with Oladipo just really being right in front of him at that small forward spot, and then Watford at the 4. But yeah, no, I mean, you put him in for enough time, he's going to find a way. If he can get a rhythm, it helps him out a lot. He really got a rhythm today. Was also very entertaining in post-game. Will has a very hot and cold relationship with the media, as we might have pointed out. Today he was entertaining, very, very entertaining. He was asked, about their shooting competitions that he has with Hulls, among others. I think Oladipo and Watford might be involved in those too. But, he says, I win every time. You guys all think Jordy's a great shooter. I win every time. And everyone was like, really? Do you really win every time? He's like, I win them all. Do I believe that? No. No. I don't believe that Jordy Hulls could possibly lose to anybody at every shooting competition every time. But I believe he wins more than most would, mostly because Will's that competitive and Will not lose. Will simply just not lose. He refuses to lose games. He's the type of guy that, like, if it's a best of 5 series and he loses 3, it's now best of 7, and it's best of 9, and it's best of 11, it's best of however many you're going to play until he decides he's done, which I don't think is ever.
He's the guy that believes he wins them all, whether he wins them all or not.
That's
he believes
also true.
He won. There was always something somebody else did. Somebody else was cheating. They just didn't get enough shots up for him to win.
Will's not losing.
Whatever.
Will's not losing. Period. But Will, I mean, but that's what they need from him. He's the competition. I've called him. I said, the way I put it in terms of the emotional leadership of this team, to me, Jordan Hulls is the heart, Victor Oladipo is the soul, Will Sheehy is the backbone. And I think you saw that again today. You keep seeing that. And even occasion again, when they're, one of their Player of the Year candidates is down, Will Sheehy made sure that did not really matter all that much. But a lot of good performances from a lot of other guys in this one. Cody Zeller had 19 points, 9 rebounds. Christian Watford had 14 and 4. They did a really interesting thing, I thought, with the defensive matchup on A.J. Hammonds. Hammonds had 30 points in the first game, only has 6 in this one. He was 3 for 10 from the field. They took Zeller off of him and put Watford on him as kind of the main, just sort of body-up defender. They put Cody Zeller on Raphael Davis, who's a guard, a 6'5 guard. And just sort of had him sag back, just kind of let Raphael just take, the perimeter, kind of dare him to shoot threes and make it hard for him to drive, and just mostly leaves Zeller there kind of sagging in the back to block shots. And it worked brilliantly, basically. They almost took Hammonds out of the game in this one.
It did, and maybe Hammonds took
it
himself.
It helped that Hammonds had some fouls, and
Hammonds kind of took himself out a little bit. He just didn't seem, engaged, focused, whatever you want to call it as much today. I don't know if he just assumed that, he had a good game last time, he'll have a good game today.
Right.
But I think that's kind of one of the interesting things of this game is that Purdue's the team that took a 37-point loss last time, and you would think that they would come in with something to prove, with some adjustments to make, to do something different, and instead it was Indiana that was the one making the adjustments, doing something a little different defensively, definitely had the hunger and the fire from the start, and it was just kind of roles reversed. I expected Purdue would come in here with some kind of fire, especially with the kind of skid that they're on, needing a win badly to kind of get things going in the right direction.
Playing with some sort of desperation, and you didn't see it at all. I mean, and it's always weird. You don't want to take too much from warm-ups and stuff like that. But, I was even just watching Purdue at the beginning. Like, they don't look like they're really here. Like, they don't look like they really noticed, like, hey, we're playing the number one team in the country. It's our in-state rival. We've been bad. We need to step it up. We need to do something. I mean, they look like, it was an easy Saturday morning walk. I mean, they and it was in Indiana, like you said, I mean, took full advantage of that, number one. Came in fired up. I mean, I think Tom Crean pointed out, he says, these guys heard a lot of questions about a letdown and stuff like that. I mean, they did hear a couple, and I don't think people were really suggesting that it was actually going to happen. I think they were, and I'm just as guilty as anybody. I use those quotes the same way to be like, oh, this isn't, like, is this a letdown? No, it's not a letdown game. But, they apparently took at least some of that to heart, that people thought, well, you're going to look down on a team that you lost to by 37, that you beat by 37 points. And they were not interested in doing that at all. I mean, they wanted to beat them by worse than 37.
And I think this is another case where, once again, you've got guys on this roster with especially Watford and Hulls and Elston and those guys that went through a lot of losses to Purdue.
And got beat by Purdue pretty bad before.
And they were going to take full advantage of any and all opportunity to return the favor here before their careers were over.
Absolutely. And Watford has just been that consistent, that physical, and that fired up lately. I mean, he was very physical with A.J. Hammonds. And you really kind of, if you watch this game, I think, on tape and think back to Christian Watford as a freshman, or Christian Watford as a sophomore, or even some games earlier this year, it's almost like a different guy. I mean, he was rough. I mean, he was rugged. And you almost never use that word with him because he's such an easygoing guy, and he was just never big on being physical, liked to play out on the wing, shoot threes and stuff like that. Right now, he's a physical guy. He is beating people up inside, and there are tougher players in the league, but he's getting there. He's averaging 7.5 rebounds a game in Big Ten play coming into this. I mean, he's playing tough, and he really got into A.J. Hammonds tonight.
Yeah, that's what I really liked was, he had that lower leverage on Hammonds, and he wasn't afraid to use it and be physical and kind of move him around a little bit, which is what Tom Crean said they wanted out of him in that position.
Right.
Zeller obviously has the height to match up with Hammonds, but he doesn't have that low base, and Watford was able to get a little lower and be physical and move him around. And Watford even showed a little fire.
Almost got in a fight.
One jump ball here, he was ready to scrap.
Which was great because I think it was funny. I didn't get a clear look at this, but other people saw it, that Sheehy held him back, and Sheehy was smiling as he held him back, because and I think it's almost like Will is always up for that, as long as I think he would do that a lot more if it didn't mean technical fouls and getting kicked out. Will would get into those all the time, but I think Will was smiling like here's the fire in the big guy that we've been waiting for 4 years really. I mean, it's not that it's never been there, but while it's consistent, wow, Christian Watford is getting into it with somebody. How about that?
Yeah.
And that's what it was. That's the way Christian Watford's playing right now. He wants it that bad. Other interesting notes from this game. Tom Crean is at 500 for his career at Indiana, and that's with very few people is that a major accomplishment. Considering what he took over, considering the losses he had to suffer in his first 3 years, for him to get to 500 by year 5 is pretty amazing. I don't think anyone has it ever been as big of a milestone as it is for Tom Crean, considering what he took over and what he did to his own record.
Well, considering the hole that he dug himself those first 3
Not
years.
dug himself. It was dug for him.
Well,
I mean,
yes,
like
yes.
that sounded bad. Like, I mean, he took something over that was going to be a rebuilding project. He made a point to say it today. You know, like when I took the job in Indiana, it's like I used to care about career winning percentage. I used to care about how many games we won because I had all that going at Marquette, and you know my numbers looked really, really good. And when I got here, I didn't want to look at them anymore because I'd be too depressed. And you know, he earned his way back to 500. You know, you have to give him credit for that. For as much as he took on, and it was going to hurt him, it was going to hurt his numbers. You know, for him to get back to it this fast is pretty impressive.
And I think it was a good example set for him. He was willing to sacrifice his own numbers, and so it kind of set an example for the players going forward that you might have to take some losses. You're going to have to take some blows. You know, there's going to be some downtimes, but if you stick with it, there's an upturn coming eventually. And IU's seen that the last 2 years. 50 wins now
50
after
and 12.
today.
Yeah, this was the 50th win in the last
year.
2 seasons. 27 last year. They're at 23 already. Yeah, I mean that's it. Really is phenomenal when you sit there and look at it and consider, like, you know, God, how many losses that we watched, we covered in this building, how many Tom Crean suffered in this building, and now and against teams like Purdue. I mean, when they had Robbie Hummel and Jawan Johnson and Etwan Moore and all those guys, I mean, Indiana could not compete with those teams. I mean, they tried, they fought, they scrapped, they just didn't have the firepower. And now the shoe is very much on the other foot. Purdue just doesn't have the firepower, and right now is just starting to lag and just hitting that just really sort of despondent period where you can't get anything going, and it's sort of, and I don't think we ever really saw what we're seeing right now. You know, is untalented as much as Indiana lacked firepower. I don't know that we saw the lethargy necessarily that we're seeing right now. We did for a couple games, I think, but for a stretch like this, I'm not sure.
But interestingly, I mean, one of Matt Painter's comments post-game was that he hopes his players are looking at a Christian Watford and a Jordan Hulls and that class for what they went through and how they were willing to stick it out when they could have transferred out or gone somewhere else or just kind of turn tail and run. Yeah. And he hopes his guys kind of develop that same perspective, that same drive to succeed in the future.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's funny because Tom Crean used to say that about Chris Kramer. Tom Crean very much. I remember at a press conference, he very much pointed out, Chris Kramer is what you want to be. I mean, that's what he told his guys then. And I think Zach Osterman pointed this out. I didn't see this because I didn't have a good angle on it. But he said that Matt Painter actually at one point he saw Oladipo just dive down on the floor and go out for a ball. When he picked him up, he kind of gave him like a bro hug and said and then pointed at his guys like that's how you do it. Did the same thing with Will Sheehy, and Painter is doing the same thing using those guys as examples as Crean did. And Crean admitted this, said that I used those guys as examples as he did with guys like Chris Kramer and Etwan Moore and Robbie Hummel. So interesting to see how this has all changed around. This is going to be a good rivalry, I think, in 2 years when Purdue gets it back together. When these guys are older and Indiana loses the guys they've got right now and has to rebuild it with freshmen. Those are going to be some big time games. That's when the Indiana-Purdue rivalry really comes back. I'm thinking 2014.
I agree.
15. So anyway, thanks guys.